It's the week ending Saturday, the 29th of July, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen the government announcing the death of the internal combustion engine in 23 years' time, wildfires in France causing the evacuation of 10,000 people, and the Republican Senate failing to back the repeal of Obamacare. But we're here to bring you some of the stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news, not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann. Let's unwrap the week. And joining me from the week's digital team this week are Arion McNicoll, Rebecca Gillie, and our very own Mr. Darcy, Cameron Tait. And starting the show this week, it's Arion. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
So news this week suggests that we're one step closer to The Handmaid's Tale becoming reality.
If we will not change the ways that we are living and the environment and the chemicals that we are exposed to, I'm very worried about what will happen in the future. Eventually, we may have problems with reproduction in general, and it may be the extinction of the human species.
Dr. Haggai Levine from the Hebrew University Jerusalem talking to Palab Ghosh on the BBC's Global News podcasts. Sperm counts are down, Arion. That's what we're talking about.
That's right.
Why?
Because a new study came out on Tuesday that men in America, Europe, Australia and New Zealand had sperm counts that are 50% lower than they were 40 years ago. And the news gave way to these kinds of slightly alarmist and not terribly scientific sounding predictions of the end of humanity from people like Haggai Levine, who is the lead researcher on the project. But I think it's interesting because even though the results were as significant as that, it still didn't capture front pages in quite the way that one might have expected for news that fertility is potentially at risk. Male fertility for a long time has been a matter that is almost taboo. It seems to have been changing more recently, and there are increasing amounts of information about men and their role in fertility. But even so, it seems like a study like this could have used a bit more attention than it did.
And Cameron, copyright law prohibits us playing a clip from Children of Men, the dystopian movie. But is that the world we're entering? A world without children?
Well, I guess if it depends.
Yes or no?
A world without children, no. It makes me wonder, though, if it will almost kind of stabilise the population, because obviously we've had quite a huge boom, and I'm wondering if this will maybe actually have a positive effect of kind of rounding it off ever so slightly.
Yeah, and Rebecca, that's the thing that we've been hearing actually for years, isn't it? When things do get reported, it's that we have a worldwide population problem. There are too many people.
It's funny you should bring it up, actually, because I was just thinking that when you were talking just now, Arion, that if this is kind of the end of humanity, the beginning of extinction, and how it hasn't got that much attention, it's just one of these doom and gloom type warnings on a huge scale that we get that people just don't really seem to be able to compute. It's the same with population. People have been warning we're going to have exhausted our resources, there's not going to be enough room and support for everyone on the planet. But it doesn't really sink in, and it's kind of the same thing with global warming and climate change, is that the majority of people don't really seem to be able to engage with a problem that's that huge. That
question about whether this is going to lead to the extinction of mankind, it's hard to take that in. I mean, if a nuclear weapon hasn't gone off, it's hard to really see the impact of something. It's at the moment it just seems very theoretical, right? It's kind of a warning of things to come rather than necessarily, well, here it is. It's the end of civilization as we know it.
It's interesting when people saying, extinction, the end of civilization. What they mean is the end of Western civilization is what they're really talking about. Because if I remember rightly, the steep decline in sperm count was not replicated in samples from South America, Africa.
It wasn't, but just because there weren't enough studies in those places. So the theory is that it's global.
What is the issue, though? Because looking around, there seem to be lots of children being born. Anyone that I know that's had problems conceiving, actually it seems more likely than ever that IVF might help them have a child anyway. So what's the problem, even if sperm count does go down?
Yeah, I think that the concern is that lower sperm count, well, there's many types of concern, but one of the concerns is that lower sperm count actually comes with all sorts of other affiliated health problems. Is this being caused by some sort of environmental thing that has changed in the world and now we're ingesting more chemicals, or lifestyles are worse, or what's going going on, simply to get on top of the fact that sperm count is down, and that is known to have a concordant effect on life expectancy and also cancer incidence. It's something that we should get on top of, and we need to find what's causing it. I think that's the main concern for scientists.
Yeah, it's fascinating that it's declined so steeply from the 70s. If it's found that it had declined that much since like the 1910s or the 1920s, I think it'd be so much easier to speculate on the causes, because they've come up with, diet, lifestyle, all these kind of factors.
Watching too much TV.
But, the 70s
I'm surprised computer games weren't blamed for this.
I know.
As well.
They weren't that, the 70s weren't that different from the present day. I mean, people were probably in somewhat better physical shape than they are now, but people still spent a lot of time watching TV and ate junk food. It doesn't seem like there's been that huge of a change in lifestyle from the 70s particularly.
No, but that makes it even more interesting, doesn't it? I mean, what has changed if there haven't been major lifestyle shifts? What is different that means that there has been this steep
People were
drop-off?
huffing lead and...
I loved it. Maybe we need to go back to huffing lead.
Are you referring to smoking? I'm trying to see what you're poetically grabbing at.
There was a lot of, there were so many chemicals around in the 70s as well. They didn't have, environmental regulations to the extent that we do now in the Western world.
Maybe it's not chemicals, maybe it's radiation that's causing it. If you think about all of the things that we're exposed to now that we definitely weren't exposed to in the 70s.
Like what?
Your mobile phone, giving off a mobile phone signal, Wi-Fi systems, Bluetooth systems.
Video games.
Got to blame everything on video games.
Actually, I know you can sort of drift into pseudoscience with this stuff and it's all unproven, but three men in this room. Where's your mobile phone right now, Arion?
Actually upstairs.
Okay.
It would be in my pocket.
In your pocket,
Right.
in your trouser pocket.
Yeah.
Cameron?
In my trouser pocket.
In your trouser pocket. Mine is currently in my trouser pocket. That is fairly close to my sperm, isn't it? Is that, do you think, potentially an issue?
Well, I have seen that there are studies, a lot of them do have, they're not kind of 100% certain, but they have found that there is a link between the radiation from your phone and your sperm count. So it wouldn't surprise me. But I think we have a society of almost we deny climate change, or a lot of people deny climate change. I know a lot of people, when you say Wi-Fi can be quite damaging to your system, they go, I'm one of them. If I really looked into it, you could probably say, yes, it would cause problems. But you've got a lot of people that will say, does Wi-Fi cause problems? They'll go, nah, it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But it could.
Next up, it's Rebecca. What do you think this week's going to be remembered for?
This is just to say a big saluton to all our internationalist listeners.
Imago Dion sen cielo facila stredo provo plu infero subni n'existus kai supre nur ciela blu Imago ciuin homoin Avante la mondon por ciu.
If anyone plays that at my funeral, I will come back from the dead and kill them. That is the haunting sound of Stefan Schneider performing Imagu, a cover of John Lennon's Imagine, as you may have recognised, but sung entirely in Esperanto, which you may not have recognised. Rebecca, enough of your mixtapes. What is the story here?
Oh, it's kind of a convergence of two things that have been in the news slightly this week. One of which is it's the 130th anniversary of Esperanto. Dr. L.L. Zamenhof published his first book on Esperanto.
Actually, I mean, for listeners who don't know what Esperanto is.
It's the most widely spoken created language in the world. And it was developed by him in the 1880s and kind of gained in popularity sort of towards the end of the 19th century. The idea being that it would enable people from different cultures to communicate in a shared language with the ultimate goal of bringing about a union of countries. That was Dr. Zamenhof's ultimate goal.
Building a tower to heaven.
Building a tower to heaven. And then the other thing that's been in the news this week is some developments on the Catalonian independence movement. So basically the Catalonian regional government wants to hold a referendum in October. The Spanish government are very opposed to this, and the Spanish government have said this week that if any funding from the state goes towards funding the referendum, they're going to review the regional spending that Catalonia are getting, basically saying don't do it or we'll start choking you.
Okay, and how do those two stories go together? The 130th anniversary of a constructed language and a referendum in Catalonia? I don't think they speak Esperanto in Catalonia,
They do not speak Esperanto, although it sounds quite similar to Catalonian. The similarity to me is that it seems like there is a growing movement towards increased fracturing of countries, regionalism. We've seen with Kosovo in recent years, and then South Sudan before that. We do seem to be splintering off into smaller groups rather than this union of nations, which was kind of the utopian dream that was developed towards the end of the 19th century, when socialism was gaining ground. And lots of high-profile figures, people like William Gladstone, H.G. Wells, thought that a world government was more or less inevitable. And it wasn't seen as a kind of sinister idea like, now it kind of calls to mind the idea of the Illuminati and the New World Order. And it's strange to me and interesting how sharply we've moved away from this idea of like a utopian, John Lennon imagined style world to this one now, where we do seem to be increasingly shutting ourselves off despite globalization.
Okay, so it's the aspiration of Esperanto to be this unifying thing for people from all over the world, no matter what their religion or where they came from or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's very alien to people now to think that 100, 150 years ago, our ancestors actually thought that could be quite an interesting, positive development.
The global language actually is consumerism, isn't it, and globalization. There is a global banking network, there are global stocks and shares, it even includes Russia and China, and they all speak English when they talk to each other. So it's been achieved just in a much more consumerist capitalist way than was ever intended when they created Esperanto.
Definitely, and I heard a statistic that there's as many people in China learning English currently as there are English speakers, native English speakers in the world. So yeah, English is already a candidate for becoming a sort of unifying global language. But back to that point of whether it's desirable, there are so many languages that are on the cusp of becoming completely lost. And there's a like the contrary argument is that it's worth keeping those alive for two reasons. One, because they carry so much about the culture that they came from in them, and to lose the language is to lose the culture. And two, because multiple languages provide us with different ways of thinking. So if we only had one language, then we'd only have one way of syntactically thinking through ideas. So that would be my reservation with having English or Esperanto as the only language that is being spoken around the world.
And that's interesting what you say about, languages as carriers of culture as well, because when you dig into this apparently utopian vision of the late 19th, early 20th century, when you'd actually dig into it, the people who were supporting it didn't really envision losing a lot of their culture, because when they thought of world government, they were thinking of an Anglo-Saxon world government that kind of was subjugating everyone else beneath it. So their vision of what a utopian world would like was very much dominated by the idea of the Anglo-Saxon culture coming together and ruling the other cultures.
Yes, exactly. And how comfortable would the progenitors of Esperanto have felt with the current political order being the ascendant? The fact that China is now one of the more dominant countries in the world, would they feel happy with that being the future of politics, language, society?
Yeah, if you look at Esperanto, it's a combination of different Romance languages, which tells you exactly what those people who originally were, spreading it as the language of the future, that was obviously how they envisioned their future, was led by Europeans and European descendants in, America, the Commonwealth, etc.
Well, but to be fair, they also wanted to create a language, I believe, defending something from 130 years ago. They wanted to create a language, I believe, that would be as easy to learn as possible. And their thinking was, because of things like the Commonwealth and the Empire, whether politically you think that was a good thing or bad thing, people in most countries of the world had an understanding of how those languages are constructed, so it'd be the easiest thing for people to understand, rather than a completely foreign construction.
I wonder whether it would be as easy for a person who was raised speaking Chinese or Arabic.
Sure, okay, but if you're Brazilian, you speak Portuguese, for example, so you don't have to be European.
Yeah, that's true.
And do you know what? I've always wished that there was a language that was as close to English as, say, Danish and Swedish are to one another, or Italian and Spanish. You can see Danes and Norwegians and Swedes getting together and all just...
Frisian Islands. Because boy, have I got a holiday suggestion for you.
What do they speak?
They speak like an old form of Dutch that sounds almost exactly like English in simple sentences.
I think you'll find in the USA they speak something very similar to English. Is some of the ebb and flow of popularity of these kinds of movements, though, just action and reaction to whatever the political state is at the time anyway, Rebecca? So when this stuff was created, it was in reaction to a world in flux and a lot of war. And, people had seen what tribalism and individualism and localism had brought the world, and they liked the idea of global cooperation. Now we're in a situation where people see the global elites that we referred to earlier. They see the G7 and the international banking scene, and they think actually what we need is more localism. So that ebbs and flows.
Definitely. I think there's certainly an argument to be made for that. The League of Nations, which was one of kind of the big early pushes towards world government, was formed in response to World War I, which was a case of all these small federal states creating these, rivalries and kind of fiefdoms that they then were contesting. So there's certainly that case to be made, but that in a way is even more alarming because now you're seeing the reverse happen, breaking down into smaller states, smaller territories. Some could argue a more isolated nationalist mindset, which of course is drifting back again to that pre-World War I world where you had the Empire of Austria-Hungary, but then you had all those individual states within it as well, which were all chafing for independence, which ended up being the thing that sparked the whole thing off. So it's a bit worrying if we are in a circle of history.
And I think that would be Spain's criticism to the leaders of Catalonia. They'd say, well, look, yes, Catalonia may have preceded Spain, but you're returning to a thing that doesn't really exist anymore. Yeah. And to try to resuscitate it will be dangerous, would be their argument.
Yeah, like a world of European kingdoms.
Right.
Yeah, it's very Napoleonic.
Yeah.
Right, Cameron, your turn to introduce a tech story. What should we be frightened of this week?
Mr. Mann, you should be frightened of your robot Hoover watching you.
People see robots going down the street killing people, they don't know how to react, because it seems so ethereal. I think we should be really concerned about AI. AI is a rare case where I think we need to be proactive in regulation instead of reactive. Because I think by the time we are reactive in AI regulation, it's too late.
Elon Musk, speaking at the National Governors Association summer meeting earlier this month, he didn't sound like he was talking about vacuuming there, Cameron.
He wasn't talking about vacuuming there, no, but he was talking about AI, and very, very ominously, he was saying that there is a chance that if it's not regulated, it'll take over. Mm-hmm. But this week will be known for in the world of AI, as I put my tinfoil hat on. So you can get these robot hoovers, basically, that go and clean your house for you. They drive around. But there's a company called iRobot, probably named after the 2004 film, that basically wants to scan your house while its robot hoovers your house, and sell that information onto third parties. Mm-hmm. And finding it's a real tipping point in how we look at kind of surveillance and how we kind of look at kind of the balancing convenience and privacy. Obviously, you've got this robot that is making your life a hell of a lot easier, but there is a chance that it could be taking quite a lot of information from your house.
So this would be a robot vacuum cleaner that's mapping your house so that it doesn't keep bashing into your lamp or whatever. Mm-hmm. Why is that information useful to anyone apart from a rival vacuum cleaning manufacturer?
Well, what it could be used for is not necessarily a rival vacuuming manufacturer, but it could be used for other products that can be used in your home, such as smart thermostats. Everything can be smart. A smart refrigerator. Basically,
how's that useful? How does a map of your bedroom help a smart refrigerator?
By building dimensions for it. So you could find that you could take lots of information from houses, see their floor plans, and see which one's the ideal size, really.
So you could target the advertising and say, you could do with one of our smart fridges. It
exactly.
Fit perfectly. And they'd get on their mates, the Roomba and the Samsung. They love each other, they chat.
Exactly. Exactly.
And another example that smart lighting would be able to know when you're in it or out of your house and, be able to activate itself accordingly.
But how? Explain again. How would a smart light know that you're in or out your house based on a map that a vacuum cleaner's made?
Because the vacuum cleaner is being activated when you're out of the room and people turn the lights off when they leave the room.
Okay.
Are you afraid yet?
Well, no, not really. It all sounds quite convenient. I mean, marginally, all these things of incredibly marginal benefit to the point where you shrug your shoulders and think, well, so what? I'm not going to get one. But I mean, it's fine if you're into that sort of thing, isn't it?
I think that's symptomatic of how our attitudes have changed. I mean, we were chit-chatting upstairs earlier in the office about how in the 90s everyone was terrified about CCTV cameras. And it was a front page issue. Almost every month there was a story about, we're being watched all the time. And now we have the idea that you would expect to have a degree degree of privacy in public is completely, it seems so quaint to us now. Yeah. And our expectations of privacy have changed so much, even in my lifetime.
Just last night, my wife and I were walking home and we saw a new CCTV camera had gone up near an intersection that often has a lot of problems near our house. And we said to each other, oh, good, they've put up a new CCTV camera. That's going to sort out those traffic problems. Honestly, I was one of those people in the 90s going, this is terrible. We've got to get control of all of these CCTV cameras that are turning up everywhere.
Okay, but Cameron, are you afraid?
This for me is, I guess as a tech lover, it's very, very hard for me to comprehend, because when I look at, let's take CCTV cameras, for instance, whenever I'm out, I like the fact that CCTV cameras are around because it's a public place and it's making sure that everybody's safe. At home, I find it a little bit more, I like my privacy. So I don't necessarily like things monitoring me while I'm at home, but I'm all for pushing technology forwards. So if scanning my house is going to make home tech better, perhaps I would agree. Just to be clear, it won't sell your data to anybody unless you say, yeah, that's fine.
But if someone were to hack into it, conceivably they could look around your house.
And this is the theme that keeps recurring on this show, isn't it? We were talking about it last week with pornography. We've talked about it many times before. As soon as this data gets entered somewhere online, then someone can hack it if they want it, and they will know when you're in and out of your house and what bedroom you're likely to be in when you are there.
I really don't know the security of a vacuum cleaner, but let's say you drove up to someone's house and they had a vacuum cleaner inside. I wonder that you could hack into the person's vacuum cleaner just from outside their house, get a floor plan of what their house looks like, and find the easiest way of breaking in. Well, that's my real tin hat moment.
Let me just chuck in a fact that I think may not reassure anybody, but it's an interesting fact. I used to be the technology correspondent for BFBS, so I know this for a fact. The company iRobot, which makes the Roomba, has a background in military technology. Their thing before they started doing consumer vacuum cleaners was bomb disposal. Okay, so I don't know if that makes you feel... So, like, security is probably quite good, actually.
Right.
That's a third act twist.
Their background is making machines that, apparently for the good, can dispose a bomb.
Okay,
but this technically could put a gun on and kill someone.
This kind of comes back to a question that I had. So at the top of this section, we heard from Elon Musk talking about the threat of AI. Stephen Hawking has given similar warnings about AI coming and destroying us all. But I've never been entirely clear on what they are concerned about. What is the except maybe now what you've told us, that actually the people who are building our vacuum cleaners also make bombs.
No, I should clarify. I believe they've now sold off the military side of their company and they just make vacuums.
So you're saying they aren't bombs.
I'm just saying that the engineers who developed it, that was their background. It's often the case, isn't it? Military technology becomes consumer technology. Sat-nav, for example.
Did you see there was I think it was Google had developed the other week, it was a video of, they'd kind of created a figure, and it was programmed to navigate its own way past obstacles, and it was using its own brain, in quote marks, to overcome those obstacles. And they were saying that this is kind of a new phase of AI where it can make its own decisions, and I guess that's where the scary stuff.
So that could be where the threat of AI taking over, or what Elon has said and what Stephen Hawking has said and what Mark Zuckerberg denies, is that if we kind of open up this R&D, we kind of say, oh, it's okay, it's just a vacuum cleaner getting information. What's next? Oh, it's okay, it's my fridge taking my information. But what happens if we just kind of keep opening these doors? It's not regulated properly, which is Elon Musk's concerns, and that we have robots that start thinking for themselves. It could accelerate so quickly that it could get to that point in our lifetime.
What, that your fridge attacks you? Is that his concern? I'm really not clear. Or is it the intersection of military technology and home tech?
It's that if your fridge has a microphone and a camera in it, then that can be used for nefarious means. The fact that it's connected to a fridge is by the by. The fact that it has a microchip in it means people can use it to harness computer power.
But people can use it, not the machines.
Yeah, but what if you got to a day when you told the Hoover to go and hoover that corner, and the Hoover was like, no, I'll start with this one, it's dirtier. This is the slippery slope.
Definitely do it. And machines, yes, they could interact with one another. And that's also a threat of what could happen. Because I can't help but think we overpower everything. Home computers, an iPad. I mean, do we really need something with that much power? Do we really need a fridge with a lot of power?
It's also killed competitive chess, because there are now programs that can easily defeat any human grandmaster.
Oh, yeah.
So we're already being thunked.
Exactly.
Well, if you've got a slippery slope in your house, good luck trying to get an iBot to work on that. That is it from this edition of The Week Unwrapped. My thanks to Arion McNicoll, Rebecca Gillie and Cameron Tait. For more from The Week, why not visit theweek.co.uk. You can download our free iPhone app, The Weekday, or you can get the magazine direct to your door. Just head to theweek.co.uk/subscribe. And remember, you can find every episode of this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for The Week Unwrapped. I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Matt Hill at Rethink Audio. Until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.